Back in the 19th century, a time of massive change and just deep uncertainty, there was this one guy whose intellectual journey really shook the very foundations of faith in England. Today, we're diving into the life and mind of John Henry Newman, a truly brilliant thinker who wrestled with one of the biggest questions we still face. How do we find truth in a world where faith and reason seem to be constantly at war? And really, at the absolute heart of Newman's entire life was this relentless, almost obsessive pursuit of truth. It's what drove him, it's what caused huge personal and professional turmoil, and ultimately, it's what cemented his legacy as a thinker whose ideas still challenge us today. So, here's how we're going to break it down. We'll start with the crisis of faith that defined his era and look at his key role in the Oxford movement. Then, we'll follow his controversial path to Catholicism, explore his game-changing ideas on education, and finally, unpack his lasting legacy on how we think about faith and reason. Okay, so to really get Newman, you have to get the world he lived in. The 19th century wasn't just about steam engines. It was an age of major spiritual anxiety. New discoveries in science, new philosophies, they were all challenging long-held religious beliefs. And right there in the middle of this storm was John Henry Newman, just trying to find an anchor in a sea of doubt. But see, Newman wasn't the kind of guy to just sit back and react to the chaos. No, he went on the offensive. His first big project was this incredibly ambitious plan to save the Church of England, not by modernizing it, but by taking it back to its ancient roots. And this became known as the Oxford movement. So what was this movement all about? Well, basically, Newman and his friends felt that the Anglican Church had kind of lost its way, that it had become too influenced by politics and new ideas. Their solution was to look backward, to rediscover and really re-emphasize the Church's deep historical connections to the ancient Catholic tradition it had split from centuries before. And their main weapon in this fight? Pamphlets. Yeah, I know, it sounds a little low-tech, but in an era before social media, these tracts for the Times were like viral blog posts. They were these short, punchy essays that argued for a return to tradition, and they absolutely forced a national conversation about the identity of the Church of England. And this is where it all just blew up. In a publication called Tract 90, Newman himself made this incredibly bold claim. He argued that the Church of England's core beliefs weren't actually anti-Catholic at all. He said you could read them in a way that aligned with Catholic teaching. Now, to his critics, this wasn't just some interesting interpretation. It was treason. The backlash was immediate and it was fierce. That whole firestorm over Tract 90, it was a profound turning point for Newman. His big attempt to reform his church from the inside had, failed spectacularly. And this forced him into this period of intense soul-searching that would lead to the single most dramatic decision of his entire life. Just look at the timeline here. It really shows you how big this was. After the Tract 90 blow-up in 1841, Newman just vanishes from public life. Only 4 years later, he follows his conscience all the way and officially converts to Roman Catholicism, which for a top Anglican leader was absolutely scandalous. And it would take him nearly 20 years before he was really ready to explain why he did it. And that explanation came in the form of his masterpiece, Apologia Pro Vita Sua, which basically means a defense of one's own life. And this book, wow, it's an incredible look into a person's soul. It's not some dry theological argument. It is a deeply personal, emotionally raw, and intellectually brilliant account of his spiritual journey and why he made the choice he did. But Newman's influence goes way beyond just theology. After his conversion, he was asked to help start a new Catholic university in Ireland, and this challenge led him to spell out one of his most powerful and enduring legacies, a whole new philosophy of what a university should even be for. Newman's vision was, frankly, radical. He pushed back hard against the idea that a university is just a training ground for a job. For him, the real goal was to cultivate the mind itself. Education was about pursuing knowledge for its own sake, where things like philosophy and liberal arts are central, and where the ultimate goal is to shape a well-rounded, thoughtful human being, not just a future employee. And this brings us right to the core of Newman's philosophy. He spent his whole life grappling with this one fundamental question. How do we actually come to believe things, right? Is it just about logic and evidence, or is there something more going on? He tackled this question head-on in his book, The Grammar of Assent. In it, he explores the messy, complex, and often non-logical ways we give our assent, our genuine agreement, to ideas,
especially when it comes to faith, where you can't just run a lab test to get a final answer.
And here, Newman makes this absolutely crucial distinction. On the one hand, he says, you have notional faith. This is when you accept something intellectually. It makes sense on paper, the logic checks out. But then there's real faith. And this is that deep personal conviction that grabs your entire being. It's the difference between looking at the blueprint of a house and actually living in it. For Newman, that real assent, shaped by life and experience, was the bedrock of true belief. So when you look back, these three works are really the pillars of his whole journey. The tracts show his public fight for the soul of his church. The Apologia is the deeply personal story behind his conviction. And the idea of university is his grand vision for cultivating a truly thinking society. They really tell his whole story.
And look, Newman's ideas aren't just some historical curiosity. They are incredibly relevant today. He completely reshaped Catholic theology, his arguments about beliefs still pop up in philosophy, and his passionate defense of a liberal arts education is at the center of today's debates about what college is even for. But maybe most of all, he stands as this powerful champion for listening to your own conscience in the search for truth.
And that really leaves us with a question Newman spent his entire life on, a question that feels more urgent now than maybe ever before. In our world where we are drowning in information and arguments, where we can notionally know just about anything, what does it actually take to find a real personal conviction that we can truly live by?